Hello, York Sports Network fans, and welcome back to another playoff preview because once again, York Sports Network is not allowed to stream. Unfortunately, Marist just made the decision to revive a contract with NFHS, again disallowing us to stream because of the exclusivity clause inside of their contract. And as much as we would love to stream, it's a long and complicated process that would make way too many people mad. So unfortunately, we are stuck doing this, but this is still fun, I would say.
Great time.
It's a great time. So speaking of great times, it's a great time to be a Duke here in Elmhurst as York is about to have the most prolific sports weekend in the history of York, I'd say. As York is playing a historical powerhouse in the Marist Redhawks in the second round of the IHSA playoffs. Then also Saturday at 1 p.m. in Peoria, the girls cross-country team is going to face off against many teams, but there are really only one competitor, and that's Prospect High School. They are basically dead even so far this year, so it'll be interesting to see. And then Friday and Saturday is the Final Four for IHSA soccer, York boys soccer, and the soccer team is currently undefeated. They're going up against a one-loss Romeoville team on Friday night. And then on Saturday, they'll either, if they win that game, they'll be in the championship at 8 p.m. at Hoffman Estates. And then if they lose, then they're going to play in the third place game also at Hoffman Estates at 6 p.m. But this is a football preview show, so let's get into it. You have the Marist Redhawks, who are 7-3 with a plus 142, while the Dukes are 10-0 with a plus, I want to say, what were they, 233? There, it should say there that it says they were 272, and then they won the last game by, 21? So quick math, that's going to be, 303? Not
293.
Plus 293, the
There
Dukes
we
are
go.
this season. But would you like to give us a little preview on a little more about this matchup?
I would love to. So Marist, like you said, 7-3. They were ranked as the 18th seed, but that is very misleading because in Michael O'Brien's Super 25, they are the number 10 team in state. York is 4. So a very, very good team just because these IHSA rankings, they always have to for the teams with the least amount of losses. But Marist has played Glenbard West, number 6 in state. Chicago Mount Carmel, by far the number 1 team in state. And Loyola Academy, the number 2 team in state. And they lost those games by scores. They lost to Glenbard West by 2 off a missed field goal. Mount Carmel, they got smoked, 35-point loss. And then Loyola was pretty close. They kept it to 11, still a double-digit loss. But instantly, those 3 losses against top 10 teams propelled them down to 18th. So they had to take on Naperville North, the 15th seed, at Naperville North in the first round, and they beat them pretty good, 42-28, a 14-point convincing win on the road. So now they'll be taking on the Dukes, and this is where the true test begins. Like I said about Marist, they have by far the hardest schedule of any team in the playoffs, a .684 opponent win percentage, and their opponents have won 54 games. 54-27 is their opponent's combined win-loss record, and no other team in the playoffs has a opponent win-loss record, or I should say opponent wins of more than 50. So obviously far and away the most experienced at playing good teams. But you may look at this and say, Marist lost to Glenbard West at home. York beat Glenbard West at home. So this definitely should be a very even battle. Just by looking at the schedules, it's hard to tell which one favors which team. They're just both so even and both so good. It can, once you get to the top 10, it's basically just a toss-up from there.
Definitely, yeah. But I'd say the major issue, though, is that this is going to be the far and away the most talented team that the Dukes are going to have to play this year, unless, of course, they face Loyola Academy at that state semifinal level. But so far this year, definitely, even if they make it to the next round, this team's more talented than what Palatine or Manuka are. And then I'd argue this team is more talented than a Lincoln Way East, because the Lincoln Way East is very similar to York, where York doesn't have a lot of high-level D1 recruits, if any, to my knowledge. And then, to my knowledge, Lincoln Way East also has maybe 1 or 2. But here at Marist, there's about 4 or 5. You talk about studs on the defensive end of the ball. You have number 7, John Marist, or not John Marist. He goes to Marist. John Nestor is his name. Number 7, committed to Iowa for defensive backs, and that's pretty good. Iowa produces a lot of great defensive backs. In recent memory, first-round pick Josh Jackson, who's really not worked out to his pick level, but he's been a decent bounce-around corner for a few years. So Iowa very good at developing defensive backs, so they really look at the talent. So Nestor is going to be a ball hawk, so that's really going to limit the Duke's passing game and to make it tough. Then you also have Jamel Howard, who earlier this year committed to Wisconsin, then decommitted, and this past month he received an offer from the University of Michigan. And he's a defensive lineman, and he was the lineman of the year in the Chicago Catholic Blue division, as well as Nestor, as we were talking about before, was the defensive player of the year. Now, the Chicago Catholic League breaks it up into divisions of 4. So that might not seem like a lot, and that might seem like, oh, it's pretty easy to win. Well, this is their division. Loyola Academy, Mount Carmel, and Brother Rice, who are all teams who have made it to the state final in the past 4 or 5 years. All of them each having an undefeated bid at it. And the only team that hasn't won a state championship from those 4, besides Marist, is Brother Rice, and that's because they got upset while being undefeated from Loyola Academy in 2018. So this is a stacked division, and for him to win, or for both of them to win their respective awards, is quite impressive. And can you talk a little bit more about Marist as a team historically?
So, yeah, Marist in the playoffs, they're always that team that can get to the championship, but they're always just that one game short, that one player short. Marist, comparing to York throughout their playoff history, Marist has 22 appearances. They have a winning record, 34-21 in the playoffs. They have 3 second-place trophies, but 0 first-place trophies. They've gotten to the big game, haven't always been able to win it. As for York, I think we said this last week, 20 playoff appearances, a losing record of 14-19. I believe, Josh, that the farthest they've ever gotten is the semis a couple of times.
Correct. They made it to the semis in 1995 or 96, and then they made it to the semis in 2008.
So, yeah. So, definitely Marist having that little bit more of experience, but then you can also make the argument, they don't have enough experience to go all the way. Like, they've always lost at some point, so definitely this York team has the potential to knock them off, obviously. Looking at the stats for last week, it wasn't the most convincing of wins. Last week, York played Oswego East at home, 5-4 Wolfpack. They won this game 31-10, but it kind of took them a quarter to really get the offense rolling. Veza was 12 of 17 for 165 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. And the leading receiver in that game was Luke Maylander. Charlie Specht was held in check the majority of the game. Maylander caught 7 receptions for 123 yards and a touchdown, including a long 36-yard catch to really open up the game. The rushing attack was pretty good as well. Melvin had a hat trick, 2 second-half touchdowns. It was 21 attempts for 128 yards, 3 touchdowns. But, it kind of took a little bit of time for the Dukes offense to really get rolling. There were a couple 3-and-outs. The Dukes had a punt block. They were actually losing for a little bit. But eventually they got it going. Veza and Maylander was really the wide receiver quarterback duo that they needed. So, that was always good. But the issue that I have is you can't get off to that slow of a start against Marist, because Marist is just going to be on you like that. They have a really explosive offense, one of the few in the state that has such a prolific deep passing attack, which I kind of mentioned last week. You can put up points in a hurry. It's not like the typical high school offense where it's a 15-play, mostly running touchdown drive. So Marist can put up points in a hurry if York isn't responding or getting ahead of that. They could be down 2 touchdowns in the first half, which is worrisome.
Definitely. And, it's very worrisome when you look at this offensive side of the ball too. As we already talked a lot about Jamel Howard and John Nestor, who were all conference players as well in the Chicago Catholic League. But then you also have linebacker Duke White, who was a stud, a tackle eater, and he's great in the run game because of his explosive ability, and his ability to read plays is what really caught my eye while watching his huddle, is that his ability to find the hole just as good as a linebacker, or just as good as a running back, which makes me think, I wonder if he played running back in the day in his Pop Warner days, because his ability to find that hole and then using his athleticism to explode and get to that hole is really impressive. And then on the offensive side of the ball, they have a great offensive line, particularly their guard, Ben Meehan, is really, really good, and he's getting D1 offers, as well as Ryan Sims, the wide receiver number 4, who is now committed to Miami University of Ohio in Oxford. And then you have Dermot Smith, who is another all-conference player. So this team is stacked and very good and ready to roll this year. And, you know, I was looking through past playoff seasons for Marist, and last year looks very similar to this year. You had a South Elgin team who was the number 2 seed at 9-0. They played at home versus Edwardsville, you know, a very far away team. And Oswego is a good distance, probably about an hour 15 from Elmhurst. That game's much closer than it should have been. That game was 24-13. I'd say the Dukes probably should have won that game by more than 21. And then they go and play the number 18 seed, who went to Glenbard East and won, and that's Marist, who's 7-3 again this year. Then they played at home versus this undefeated South Elgin team, score 30-7. So it's a little scary to look at that, and you know, they always say history repeats itself. So we hope, as members, or not members, students at York High School and fans of York football, that the Dukes obviously pull off the win that they should win, right, according to the seed. But this team is stacked to the gills and very talented. It's just a matter, can the Dukes use their coaching and use their all-around depth and ability, because that's always the issue with this Marist team, I'd say, is, as you were saying, they just don't have enough. It's that depth. They always have the star talent. They just recently had a 5-star wide receiver transfer down to IMG to further his career in a more productive way. Obviously, if you got the chance to go to IMG, go to IMG. Don't really blame you for doing that, but they always got that top-end talent. It's a matter of, is the depth there? And that's another question with this team, right? Is the depth there for this team? And the Dukes have always been, and always these suburban teams with not a lot of top-end talent that's being recognized by Power 5 conferences. A lot of the time, these teams are extremely well coached and extremely well rounded. And if we get into the coaching with Coach Fitz, he actually was, I want to say, the offensive coordinator. I am not for sure on that, but I know he was a member of Marist's staff from 2010 to 2013, and they still use his plays, and they still use the same play calls and the same verbiage. So that could give the Dukes an advantage. So there's definitely some shared offensive schemes and thoughts and defensive ability between these two teams, and it's just a matter at who is going to be able to come out on top. And based on your research, Gavin, who do you think is really going to be an X factor for both sides of the ball for this game to really stand out and turn this game one way or another?
So I'm really going to call out Charlie Specht in this game, just because I'm not calling him out. Not calling him out. You know, he's definitely gone against some really tough talent, and he'll take on some more tough talent. But I do really think that he is the X factor, and he really needs to have a big game. He's kind of been held in check, not really a fault of his. Like I said, he's just playing against good teams, and he's had Veza and Maylander have really worked out well. But I feel like you're going to need more than just one option in this game. This just kind of feels like a game where you're going to need a big play from multiple guys. And with this talent, you know, you're not going to be running the ball 25 times like you could against Oswego East. So I'm saying either a big game from Specht or a big game from Mancini is what I predict this weekend.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I really like that because the Marist linebackers are definitely more built against the run, and this is one of the top run defenses in the state. And Mancini's got to use his athleticism to really break it open and be able to, as you said, he's been a bit quiet for the past couple of games. But I'd say I more feel bad for Specht for these past couple of games because he's been double-teamed every snap. Everyone knows how good he is, so they've been just double-teaming double teaming him, and thankfully Maylander has been making the other corner pay. And that's the question for this game, as the actual physical corners on Marist, the cornerbacks, are not necessarily the best in the world, right? The best in state, but John Nestor. So what Glenbard West did is they shaded their 3-star safety over to Charlie Speck's side no matter what. That was Joey Pope, always shaded to that side. And Speck was able to get a couple of big catches, but he was held in check for the majority of the game, but he's being double teamed as a high schooler. So the question is, can either Maylander and Mancini, as you were saying, step up and take advantage of the fact that Speck is being double teamed? Or if Marist decides to not double team Speck, to your point as well, can Speck capitalize? As he's not really had a dominant game for quite a while, for a few weeks. He hasn't really had a huge game by his standards, and I really expect and hope he will be able to do that this weekend.
Yeah, it's going to be a really, really good game. It just kind of feels like everything that the Dukes have worked for these past 2 years have kind of led to this point. You know, last year, the playoff loss, they avenged that this year. You know, beating Glenbard West, their quote-unquote, in their eyes, our big brother, beating them twice in this year. It just kind of feels like the Dukes finally have had this confidence, and they've, like, avenged their demons, basically, to where it's all kind of come up to this game at Marist at 1 p.m. One more game note to note is that Marist is actually a worse team at home, only winning games by an average of 10.8 points per game, a 2-2 record compared to a 5-1 away record, winning games by 16.5 points. So interesting.
I think that shows like where their talent is that their talent is able to show up on the road. And granted, their home games have been very tough.
Yeah.
Their home schedule has been Glenbard West, Merriman, and Loyola Academy, and then Carmel, down south Carmel, not Mount Carmel. They played at Mount Carmel. But anyways, as you know, to your point, they are not as prolific at home, and we've heard stories about how their student section isn't necessarily as energetic as York's, let's say, as a way to put it. But, you know, we need all you guys, all you Duke fans and Duke parents to get out there so we can be an effect on the game. And especially in high school, you know, they say up in Seattle that they're the 12th man and they really affect it. But it's even more applicable at the high school level because these are kids. You know, even for myself, and I don't want to speak for you, but probably for you as well, if you're getting, you know, not so nice comments being yelled at, don't yell not so nice comments, but high schoolers are rowdy.
Just make noise.
Just make noise. All that noise that gets in their head, that screws them up, that, you know, throws them off their rhythm and whatnot. So it's a matter, can the Duke student section and the Duke families and parents come out and really cheer them on and really have an effect on the game? So be there Saturday at 1. If you can't be there, well then be down in Peoria and support the girls cross country team. If you can't be there,
somewhere,
support the Dukes on their state championship quest for soccer. So support the Dukes in some way, and support the Dukes in some way this weekend. But back to the game, this Marist team's recent playoff history is scary. They are a very good team. A quick little rundown of their recent playoffs was last year they were 9-4 plus 233 state semi loss versus, I don't know what school that is. I wrote it down. Very messy handwriting, my bad. But then the year before that, they lost to the eventual state champions, undefeated Lincoln White East in the semis. Then they lost to an undefeated Brother Rice in the state semis. Then they lost in the quarterfinals to an undefeated Loyola Academy team. Then they got upset in the first round versus New Trier, and that was 2016. And then all the way back to 2015, they lost again in the state finals that time to an undefeated Loyola Academy. So this team, very good, very talented, playoff ready. Can the Dukes match them? That's the question. And we'll get our answer on Saturday. Well, any last words?
No, should be a good game.
Should be a great game. Be there. Support the Dukes in any capacity at some point. And I, once again, will be live tweeting the game throughout the entire game. I will give you updates, drive updates, big play updates, score updates, all that sort of stuff. So tune in to our Twitter. Follow our Twitter, once again, at York.network, network, to check up on live updates as soon as things happen, to be able to be caught up on the action. And if you need to watch it, it's on NFHS Network. Once again, just look that up, and you can pay the $12 to $15 if you would like to watch the game. And thank you all for watching. Leave a comment down below if it's nice, and if it's not nice, don't say anything.
Go Dukes.
Go Dukes.